When we think of Harry and Meghan, we do think, of course, of disaster, catastrophe, drama, soap opera, all of that sort of stuff. But as many people have pointed out, there were another couple, of course, or should I say there was another couple, that did, all of these things possibly a lot better, a lot more glamorous without all of the drama. But behind the scenes, let me tell you, they were equally as, shall we say, in the modern world, grifting to try and make a buck, even though they'd managed to get through millions by this point. We're talking about the one and only Wallis and, of course, her David. Yes, the forgotten king. As ever, let me explain. It's nice to see you on this beautiful vision. Look at this, isn't this gorgeous? All the wonderful people here now, they've all started to dock, for their night stay. Have you stayed on it? I know we have one or two people who watch the channel, including the lovely Teffy, who I believe lives on a barge or a boat. I'm never quite sure, narrow boat, whichever you want to say. I think it looks a lovely life, let me tell you. Very relaxing. And on a day like today, it's just the business, isn't it? You think, just to sail up and down, as long as you're not doing all the work, of course. Well, if it was you and me, well, we'd be both just sitting on top, wouldn't we? Probably floating off to a weir. Can you imagine? Never get anything done. Now, let me tell you about this, which was a fascinating story that came to me, all thanks, of course, to one of the many interviews that I've undertaken. When you think about the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, there are so many similarities as to, of course, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, all about being ostracised, some people might say having to make money independently, and of course, more importantly, keeping themselves in the limelight. And they were no different. They were king and queen, of course, of parties and all that sort of stuff. But what they really needed to do was have a steady flow of cash. They lived big, I mean, incredibly big. I know a lot of people say, yeah, well, what about the Queen Mother, Neil? Yeah, she left behind quite a big debt, about 4 million. But they lived bigger, let me tell you, because they were sort of feted and welcomed for quite a few years. And just like what's happening now to Harry and Meghan, people are getting bored and they move on. You see how this goes. But you see, they had an idea to capitalize on what we would now call today the brand. Have you noticed how it's not about being famous or anything, it's called the brand. And this is different because years ago, it was all about how well known you were in the society pages, whether you were invited to the right do's, the bashers, the balls, all that sort of stuff. They were fading. And what they needed to do was try and sort of galvanize people into remembering exactly why they were famous. So they had this idea. And according to this source, it was really instigated by none other than Wallis herself. You see, she was an avid theatre goer, loved to be seen at the theatre, particularly if they gave her the royal box, which on occasion secretly they did. You see how they grifted even then, you get the picture. But you see, she had this idea of turning their unique love story into a musical. Now, this is very strange because when I think about it, I remember being involved in a musical way back, I think in the middle 90s at the Victoria Palace called Always, based on the love story of the Duke and Duchess of Windsor. And inexplicably had the multi-talented and very beautiful 3 Degree star Sheila Ferguson popping up singing, I think, A Lover's Carousel, if I'm corrected right, of course. Maybe, Sheila, if you're watching, you might know. It's funny how the mind plays tricks. So there was a musical, as I say, called Always. It wasn't a success and it folded quite quickly. But you see, Wallis and David, as it were, wanted, and the Duke, should I say, thought they would get somebody like Noel Coward to pen it. And Noel had to go along with them because he was their friend. But of course, he was also a rather unique friend for none other than our wonderful monarchy. Likewise, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and the Princesses Margaret and Elizabeth. And he didn't want anything to jeopardize that particular friendship. Let's not forget, at that point, he wasn't exactly covered in glory, His big years were still there. Of course, in the 1950s, he went on to play Las Vegas to great acclaim, and the Duke and Duchess of Windsor popped over there to support him. But she really wanted him to put pen to paper to create what she considered to be her musical, their story, their love story. And when you think about it, it would have made perfect sense. The bottom line truly was, and this is what the source told me, was that they couldn't get backers for this, and it certainly wasn't something that would have been put on over here in the United Kingdom, simply because it would have seen as bad taste. You couldn't have put it on across the Commonwealth in wonderful places like Canada, New Zealand, Australia. It just wouldn't have worked. Nobody would want to be associated. In America, it may have worked, but then again, people wanted to see it being a success first, and they knew about the notoriety of the Windsors. But for, of course, Wallis, the dream to become a darling diva of the West End stage never fully materialised. like so many things that they dreamt about. Remind you of anyone? New Sean in the very heart of Yorkshire.